It's important. I mean, stating the obvious, but we're really looking for this consistency of effort over the 4 quarters. That's what we're really looking for, and the results tend to take care of themselves when you get that right. And
welcome to the SwansCast Extra, the Swans Blog's weekend preview podcast show. In this week's episode, we preview Sydney's Round 6 clash against the GWS Giants at the SCG. We discuss selections, some social media feedback, matchups, key points, and give the weekend forecast. I'm Josh Maher, and with me tonight is Swans Blog stalwart and all-round good bloke, Stephen Park. Steve, the boss is away this week, and for some reason, he's left you and I to fly the ship.
Well, Josh, I think it's going to be a great episode. I think you and I can handle it quite well, and it may even be our best episode yet. You know, when the boss is away, the boys will play. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you are too.
I am. I just wish he had left us, an expense account, a credit card. We could go and buy things and do things and see things. And he's not a good boss, is he?
No, not really. It would have been nice for him to actually pay for us to fly up to Sydney, interview a couple of the footballers, talk to them about what they wanted to do, how they thought this game would go ahead. You know, I think this is our great opportunity to show him that we can do it on our own.
Yeah, I don't know about that, so let's just get into it, I think. So, top of the agenda, the SwansCast interview series has had its second podcast this week. Justin Mitchell interviews Joe Maher, and Joe Maher is a writer for the Footy Almanac whose writing or works has been picked up by the Sydney Swans and appears in the from the outer columns that the Swans put up on their website each week. It's a great interview. It's really worth the listen. I highly encourage people to go and check that one out.
I do too, Josh. I think he does a really good job in that interview, and I really think that Justin is doing a great concept here, interviewing fans, the local fans, about how they feel about the Swans and what they're doing. But what do you think about the mem comp that's coming up, running on the Swans blog Facebook page? Josh, have you entered one yet?
I have. It was a picture of a couple of Apple turnovers, and it said something like, the Swans game plan versus Richmond we just seem to turn the ball over a bit. It wasn't a serious attempt. There's a few really good ones on there at the moment, and that comp's been run on our Facebook page, on Instagram, and on Twitter at the moment. It was a spur-of-the-moment thing. We are going to look into prizes for whoever wins that, but we don't know what they are yet. So get your entries in, and have a go. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
That's exactly right, and some of them could be quite funny. And if the season is going to go as poorly as what some people think, we are going to need some encouragement and entertainment throughout this season.
I think given some of the things that are occurring on the field might prove to be inspiration for a few memes themselves. So get into it, have a look at it, and see what you come up with. The other thing we've got is we've got some merchandise on the Swans blog, and that's just to help with the running costs of the blog. At the moment, all of the running expenses come out of pocket from the contributors, so myself, Justin, Steve, Heather, people who regularly contribute to the blog. And if people would like to help us out, they can go over there, have a look at them, buy a coffee cup or a stubby holder or whatever we've got on there. The profit from that will just help go into running the blog. We don't plan to make any money out of it. We just like to try and cover our expenses, and that would be great. Alternatively, you can check out our Patreon page, and there's going to be a few extra articles and ebooks and interviews that only our Patreon supporters can get access to over time.
I think, Josh, the merchandise is a terrific idea because it gets us out there. It actually shows that you care about what we're doing. Get your stickers, put them on your cars. Let people know that we're out there and about.
That'd be great. And if you've got any suggestions, there is a thread up on the Facebook page at the moment. Go find that, send us an email, let us know what you think, let us know what we can change to make it better for you guys. But let's get into it. So, some articles came out in the paper this week, Steve, about Sammy Reid, basically criticising Sammy's lack of form. Now, Sammy obviously didn't play all last year. He came straight back into the side in round one, coming off a good pre-season and a couple of pretty strong performances in the JLT series. But since coming in at round one, he really has not given us what we wanted. And we talked a lot last year about how important Sam Reid was for the structure of our team, especially to give Buddy Franklin some help down the front. But it sort of hasn't really happened. So I'm just going to paraphrase Matthew Lloyd. Now, I know some people are going to go, oh, Matthew Lloyd, he was this and that. He may be not the person to put a whole lot of stock in, but Matthew Lloyd was a very good forward, so he should know a thing about being a very good forward. And he's basically said that if Sam Reid played for Adelaide or in Melbourne, or, I'll take that as Western Australia as well, that he would be under siege at the moment for his lack of performance on the field. And he said, I'll look at his stats, 12 disposals, less than a goal a game. This was the weekend against Richmond. He just dropped too many marks.
That's my concern, Josh. When you look at it, he's taken 24 marks for the season. He's averaging less than a goal a game. He's basically not doing anything. He's fumbling. His ground ball stuff is non-existent. He's not looking for the best options. He actually looks all at sea no matter where he's playing. Even defensively, he's not looking good. When he was back, he used to be our stalwart where he'd drop back into the hole and he'd take some really good contested marks. That doesn't seem to be happening. The other one that I thought was quite interesting was Chris Judd. Judd said that Reid, who has kicked only 130 goals from 126 games as a permanent forward, has not handled the ball being a forward target and he should move back. What do you think about that?
We said last year that structurally Reid was really important for us because he provided that second tall down front, that tall overhead marking forward. And when he's got the grippo on his hands, he's actually quite a good overhead mark. And I know we're going in round 6 and we haven't seen that. But when you think about it, his injury time off and you know, he was in and out of the team the year before, we actually haven't seen much of it for a couple of years now. So can he get it back? Can he be that second tall forward overhead marking option? You know, someone who can take a contested overhead grab? I'm not sure he can. And I would actually argue that Sinkers is probably the guy who should be doing that job. And we'll get onto the whole Darcy Cameron thing later, I guess, again. But just on what Juddy said as well, he also pointed out that going from forward to the back line saved Reedy's brother's career over in Collingwood. And, you know, more recently it saved Liam Jones at Carlton. And in the Liam Jones case, Liam Jones clearly beat Lance Franklin a couple of weeks ago, so maybe going to the back line wouldn't be such a terrible idea, and it's certainly something we do already because he spends a bit of time down there as a swingman, and he's not a stay-at-home forward as it is.
That's right, and he does it every game. He spends probably a sixth to an eighth of the game in the back line every single week. My major concern is he doesn't have the defensive pressure, and you look at our team, Ronk, who's we'll get to in a minute, hasn't been omitted, but he doesn't have very good defensive pressure anymore. If you bring Menzel in, we know what his form was at Geelong. That's why they basically delisted him, because he had no defensive pressure. Buddies is okay, but he can't be relied on. You've taken Papley out of the forward line, so there goes his defensive pressure. Kieran Jack was another one who used to get our tackles, but his has dropped off immensely. Sam Reid has dropped off immensely in any defensive pressure, if he ever had any, and that was proven against Richmond, where we have 2 tackles in our forward 50.
That's right, 2, and they had 22 in their forward 50, so we're sorely lacking in the forward 50 pressure stakes at the moment.
It's a real concern. But anyway, Josh, I think we better move on to team changes.
Yep.
What were they for this week?
So there's only been 2 changes for the team this week. Lewis Melican and Nick Blakey are coming in. Ben Ronk is going out, which I guess isn't too much of a surprise given his form recently. Kieran Jack is out injured with a hip again, so that might explain his fall from grace last week, because he actually had a pretty good game the week before. He was not great last week. And I just assume this is going to be that same degenerative hip complaint that he's had going on for the last couple of years.
Now, I wonder about that one. Do you reckon it's real, the Kieran Jack one?
Oh, I've got no reason to believe it's not. It's the same thing over and over again with him. He plays well, then he goes off the boil and they take him out because it's his hip again. So I just assume he's got a chronic complaint and it's not going to get any better.
And what do you think about Lewis Melican coming into the team?
I'm in 2 minds about the Melican at the moment. One of the responses for our social media question points that out as well. But look, he's a developing kid. He missed last year. He's not going to see any big forwards in the NEAFL anyway. Look, I think he's just one of those guys that we're just going to have to play him in seniors and just play him into form. Try and get him back to that 2017 form he had. Because his debut year as a key defender was pretty good. And we're throwing him in a pretty tough position down the back on some of the best forwards in the competition. So I'm not surprised that he's been getting beaten relatively easily. But we just need some improvement out of him. I'm sure he's going to come good at some stage. I'm not against it, but I'm not for it. I've got splinters on this one.
I hope you're right, and I hope he does, and I do believe he can make it. My concern is he looks very, very slow. Yeah. And our defence looks very, very slow. My other concern is Nick Blakey. I wouldn't say he had a great game in the NEAFL last week, and he's been brought back in. So now we've got Reid, Blakey, Buddy back in the forward line again.
Yeah.
Are we going too tall? Are we not making our forward line nimble enough? And that's my major concern with this, especially if what will most likely happen, Tommy McCartan at some stage will be thrown down there as well. We're having too much height. And then you bring in, and I wonder if Blakey's only there to cover until Menzel's back.
Well, maybe, but I guess the thing with the Nick Blakey inclusion is that if you desperately wanted another tall down the front, why not bring Darcy Cameron in and let Sinclair go down the front?
That's right, and that's a really good point. And Darcy Cameron, He won he's finished second in the NEAFL medal
NEAFL
last
Best and
year.
Fairest. He didn't play the whole season, and he almost snatched it at the end. He had a very good year, and I know the problem is that it's NEAFL and it's a big step up to AFL level. His debut game wasn't great, but he had a lot of mates in that game who weren't great as well. You know,
And you've got to remember,
just running.
he only played 24 minutes.
That's right, he only played 24 minutes. But just run him, just give him a few consecutive matches and see what he gives us. Effectively, at the moment, he's in the same boat as Nankervis is. And Nankervis is probably more talented ruckman, a lot more talented ruckman. But Darcy Cameron's not a complete spud either. So, and that brings us to our social media section, actually. On team selection, there was a few comments on the Swans blog Facebook page. Do you want to start reading them out for us there, Steve?
Okay, well, we've got Heather Quinlan, who is one of our regulars on the SwansCast and also a regular contributor. She said, excellent omissions, interesting additions. Melican will be put under the microscope given he may get Harry Himmelberg or Cameron to mind. Hope he finds some 2017 form. Just like you said, Josh.
Yes.
What about you?
Well, maybe subconsciously I read that earlier and I incorporated that into the back of my head as well. But I think Heather's spot on with that. Mr. Wayne Finko, he said Clark and Thurlow, please. And I'm guessing that means that Wayne's not a fan of Clark or Thurlow.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised. I actually thought they did quite well last week, but let's wait and see.
Yeah.
And then we've got Luke and Tone, lose 2 smalls. I know, not in great form, and bring in 2 talls. We have no presence once the ball hits the ground, especially in the forward half. Even if we kept going with talls, put Cameron in the ruck and let Sinclair play forward like he should. We seriously lack Crumming-type players. That's what we just talked about,
That's what we just
Josh.
talked about. Yeah, that's exactly right. I've been on the bring Darcy Cameron in bandwagon for most of the season now because I just can't see us going through a whole season playing one ruckman who's actually not a ruckman. He's actually a forward. So, and we can't continue to let Sinclair get beaten up. And I just think he's the assistance Buddy needs in the front half that he just doesn't have there at the moment.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Who was next? Mick Sayer for you?
Mick Sayer. Wow, it's Groundhog Day. What about another ruckman into the side? That way Aaliyah and Reed and Heaney don't have to ruck like they have been doing.
Yeah. I'm actually surprised they haven't tried Buddy in the ruck as well. And, remember last year when we tried Robbie Fox there for a while?
Yep. Yeah. Dean Towers, who else did ruck last year? Dean Towers, the Ginger Ninja, Rowan.
Rowan, yep. Moving on to, is it Nat Taylor? Am okay with the changes. Rose does deserve another goal, I think, and we need to see some 2018 form from George Hewitt. Totally agree with you there, Nat. This weekend. On this year's output, he is struggling to stay out of the NEAFL team. I'd actually say he'd be struggling to even be in the NEAFL team on current form, Nat, to be honest.
Georgie's not anything like he was last year, is he?
No, he's dropped off a bit, but I think teams have put a lot of work into George Hewitt.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, no, they have. And he's also not getting played in that, last year we played him as an on-baller who was either a tagger or he's a contested possession beast. And a clearance winner at some stages, his clearance has equalled that of JPK, the skipper. But this year he seems to be doing a weird mix of half back, half forward, winger, sometimes in the middle. And I'm not sure whether that's part of his development or that's because he can't or he's not able to win the ball in the centre at the moment. So old Georgie's a bit of watch this space, I think.
I think so too, but let's move on. Let's preview the match, which could be very interesting based on our last performance, Josh.
The match preview. The history between the two sides. The Swans have won 2 from the last 4 games at the SCG, and one of those losses was in the first round of the finals last year, and we'll get onto that in a tick. The Swans are currently 1 win from 5 games and playing some pretty average football at times. We're not able to string a full 4-quarter performance together at the moment. Although we do have patches where we show we are a capable team, the inconsistencies at the moment are a massive issue. The last time the two teams met was a demolition of the Swans by GWS. The Swans were on track to kick their lowest score in a final since 1899, and it was only 2 goals in junk time at the end of the 4th quarter. That got us to a meagre total of 30 points. And despite the fact the game was pretty competitive up until half-time, with the Giants went into the half-time break with the 2-goal, 3-behind lead, we then fell off the planet for the rest of the game. There's no other way to describe it. We were soundly beaten in every metric there is to measure in AFL football. Franklin came into that game with a hip injury. He was well beaten by Phil Davis and kicked donuts for the game. And what made that game more embarrassing, I guess, is that GWS were without Kelly for that game as well. and they'd only just received a few of their players back, including Toby Green from lengthy injury stints on the sideline as well. So we went into that game thinking we had a reasonable chance to get the win from the Giants. Instead, we got absolutely embarrassed on our home deck.
Which continuously happens. We get embarrassed on our home deck frequently now. Remember when it used to be a fortress, when no one could beat us at the SCG because we had the whole game style worked out for it, and now we get flogged there. My concern is this. I would actually say GWS have gotten better, and we are worse than the final last year. But let's talk about some of the stats which were damning with the Swans getting demolished in every area. They were 77 less disposals, Josh. Can you believe it?
I can believe it.
7 less clearances, 24 less inside 50s, 9 less marks inside 50, 6 less tackles, 7 less hit-outs, and that's not even against Mumford, who is a much better ruckman than Lobb, who is backed up by Tomlinson. Yes, Tomlinson, Josh. Can't even get a game this year. The last time we played Shane Mumford was in 2017, where he won the hit-outs by 4, but that was mostly due to Sam Naismith, who is actually a reasonable tap ruckman. Last year we rucked sinkers against Lobb, and the only other Swan to register a hit-out was Isaac Heaney, of all people. How tall is he? 186 centimetres, I believe.
He's not as tall as Lobb, and he's not as tall as Tomlinson either, and I think Tomlinson was the backup ruck for that game as well for the Giants. Like, Heaney either had 2 or 4 hit-outs, which is quite remarkable when you think about it. But, I mean, we're talking about a game here in 2017 where we were able to break even with Mumford, and we actually had a guy playing in the ruck who is a full-time ruckman. You know, Mumford's just come back. He's obviously come back from retirement and had a couple of games off because of his nocturnal habits, and he's had a couple.
But he's looking very, very good. Mumford has come back in. I would actually go as far to say, from the games that I've watched, and I've watched a lot of footy in the first 5 rounds, I would say he's in the top 3 ruckmans currently. Yeah,
no, he is, and he's played pretty well as well. You know, he went down to Geelong 2 weeks ago and comprehensively beat Reece Stanley. Last week again, actually, he was up against his old teammate in Lobb, and didn't demolish him, but was clearly the better ruckman over the length of the game. And we all know Mumford likes to turn it on when he plays the Swans as well. So Sinclair's going to have his hands full, and it's going to be a real issue for us.
Yeah, and I think that it could be a real issue in the fact that Mumford brings that hard edge, that real physical aggression that there's not many players have these days. My major concern around it is GWS are coming in this week off an upset loss to Fremantle in Canberra.
Yeah, it was quite a big upset down there at Canberra. Not only that, they also get Toby Studs Up Green back for the week, and Aidan Corr's not a spud himself, so they've got a couple of pretty good ins for the week. They're coming off an embarrassing loss, but they're also coming off a win 2 weeks ago where they had a very, very good win, and their first ever win down at the Cattery in Geelong, so they're going to be an absolute handful.
I agree, and I think they went into that game against Fremantle last week thinking they had won already, after beating the Cats so easily, and then it turned around. So they're going to come out firing this week. I reckon we are in a bit of strife against them.
I think we will too. So matchup, Steve, what have you got?
I've got a couple for today, and I think my first one is, based on last year's elimination final, Franklin versus Phil Davis. I am hoping Franklin gets on top, but I think Phil Davis may have him worked out.
You think so?
I do.
So Phil Davis is coming in off an ankle injury. The way he left the field last week, I thought, they'll be out without Phil Davis this week coming, but he's still listed to play. Whether he's a late withdrawal or not remains to be seen. But seeing that Franklin still probably hasn't got his fitness back from his pre-season groin surgery, if Phil Davis gets withdrawn at the last minute, who do you suspect they will put on Franklin then?
I think they will go with possibly Nick Haynes.
Okay.
I think that's the other option that they've got. He's probably as mobile as Lance Franklin, but he's definitely not as strong as Lance Franklin around the ground. That would be the only other person I could really see them going with. Finlayson, probably not tall enough. Tomlinson he's okay. He's not a spud, but he's not. I don't think he would compete against Lance Franklin. I think Tomlinson will end up on Sam Reid. That's if Phil Davis doesn't play.
Yeah, and they've also got the issue too that with Callum Ward out with his ACL for the rest of the season, purely from a leadership point of view, they probably really need Phil Davis to play as well. So if he's 85%, 80%, they'll play him. They'll play him and they'll just try and manage him.
Yep, fair enough. I agree with you. What about your first key matchup, Josh?
My first matchup is Dane Rampy on Jeremy Cameron. Jeremy Cameron's form this year has been amazing. A couple of weeks ago, he had a game where he kicked like 6 or 7 goals and had 30 disposals, which is a massive effort for a bloke who's essentially playing as a key forward. He is playing as a key forward. He's got good goal sense, he's quick, he's a good mark, he's an excellent set shot. And in a back line full of relatively inexperienced people at the moment, Rampy's about the best we've got. Well, he is the best we've got, and I'm expecting them to put Rampy onto Jeremy Cameron.
The trouble is, Rampy, throughout his whole career, has only ever played on the second or third best offensive weapon. Now we're expecting him to play on the major offensive weapon, and I don't believe that Rampy is capable of taking Jeremy Cameron in that sense. I think Jeremy Cameron is too quick, I think he's too skilled, and sadly I think he's too powerful for Rampy. Rampy plays his best football when he's able to drop into the hole and take the intercept marks or do the big punch from behind. He's never been that type of player who can physically play one-on-one. We miss Heath Grundy and we miss Ted Richards for those type of things.
No, that's right. And I guess this is the part of, Rampy's evolution from being that second or third best defender on the field to essentially being the most experienced guy in the back line. So we don't have a Ted Richards or a Heath Grundy in there at the moment who can zone off to help him, or he zones off to help them out. And he has to carry that weight of decision-making on his own shoulders, and that's probably reflected in the fact he's been put into the leadership group this year. But who else do you turn to? At the moment, it's nobody. So Dane Rampy's got a massive job. Actually, Dane Rampy has a massive season ahead of him if we're going to stay competitive all in the back line. And by and large, we have been relatively competitive in the back line. The back line's the least of our issues. So I think Rampy, it's one of those occasions where Ramps is just going to have to rise to the occasion, I think. And of all the guys in that back six, he's the one who can do it.
I hope you're right, but I won't spoil my predictions yet, but I've actually got someone I think will actually take Jeremy Cameron at some stage. But I'm going to move on to my other key matchup, which is Callum Mills versus Toby Green. Basically, Callum Mills last week, I would say, had the worst game I've seen him play in his entire career at the Swans. He was fumbly, his decision-making was poor, and now he's going to be coming up against one of, if not the best small forward in the league. Admittingly, he's had a few injuries, but I believe Toby Green is the type of player who's a game changer, and he has the ability to actually destroy us on his own if he gets enough of the ball. If Callum Mills doesn't shut him down, we are in serious strife, because I do not believe there is another player in our back line who can actually take him well now that Nick Smith is not there. Jake Lloyd is the other option, but the concern there is you put Jake Lloyd onto Toby Green, we lose all of Jake Lloyd's run and kicking skills.
Yeah, and I don't think Lloyd is really shown that he's a solid sort of one-on-one contested sort of defender, and that's the kind of environment that Studs Up Green thrives in as well. So they're going to be spread thin. They're going to be spread thin in the back line.
They are. And your last key matchup, Josh?
It's funny that Heather put that thing on social media earlier, and I don't want to steal the thunder again, but Melican on the Hindenburg, on Harry Himmelberg. Himmelberg's one of those players. He hasn't kicked a lot of goals this year, but if you leave him alone and he manages to mark the ball, he will stick it through the middle anyway. He had a couple of games last year which were just impressive for a bloke who's only played a couple of seasons, so you need to match up at all on him. I don't think they would use Ali for a job like this, because Ali's thing is always being able to zone off and intercept the ball as it comes in. And bringing Melican back into the side probably is an argument for the height that GWS have in their forward line anyway. So Lewis Melican is going to go on Harry Himmelberg. And the reason I say that is because I would rather Lewis Melican not go on to Jeremy Cameron.
Yeah, I'm in a bit of two minds with this one. Number one, Harry Himmelberg is in my fantasy team, and he hasn't been going great, so I'd like him to actually do well in a game coming up. Not necessarily against the Swans. My second point on yours is, I don't think Lewis Melican, good defender or not, is quick enough for Harry Himmelberg, because Harry Himmelberg, for a big guy, is very, very quick. He's almost as quick to be a player as a midfielder.
Yeah.
So I actually think that Milliken will really struggle for speed on Himmelberg.
Yeah, Milliken struggles for speed every week, though, so...
Yeah, it doesn't matter who he plays on.
That's true.
I actually wonder if Heath Grundy and Lewis Milliken actually had a race, who would win, because they're both pretty slow.
Well, it's something that we can find out later on, I guess. Steve, do you have a key point for us?
I do. Comes back to the ruck, and I believe that Sinclair must match up on Mumford's aggression around the stoppages for us to give our midfield a chance, because if Sinclair gets torn apart at the stoppages, I'm not talking about the centre bounces, I'm talking about the stoppages around the ground, that's where Mumford's ruck work comes into play, because he's so physical and he's so strong around those stoppages, he just gets it to his GWS midfield so well. So if Sinclair doesn't match that, we're going to struggle.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And it's one of these cases as well where you sort of think, well, if you're worried about getting flogged in the ruck, well, then why not actually have a ruckman in there who can take the heat off Sinclair, and Sinclair can be that forward that we recruited him to be. So, yeah, I agree. Mumford's a beast around the ground, and we need to either match him or beat them somewhere else to make up for the shortfall.
That's exactly right. And moving on to your point that we've talked about many, many times over many, many weeks, Josh.
Oh, yeah, I tell you what, it's probably more poignant this week because of what happened last year, and that is disposal efficiency. And I don't mean the broad stat at the end of the game either. So last week our disposal efficiency was actually 75% for the whole game. And you look at that number and you go, oh, that's really good. 75%'s like it's a distinction. But that was 75% of overusing the ball with little 1, 2, 3 handballs. The disposal efficiency at times where it really matters when the pressure is on, and that's where we lost the game last week. We conceded like 80-something points just through turnovers alone. So disposal efficiency, if we turn the ball over this week against the Orange Tsunami, they will punish us just as hard as Richmond did, if not more.
Totally agree. And it was 81 out of the 89 points that Richmond scored were through our turnovers. The first 11 goals of the game that Richmond scored were through our turnovers, kicking it in our back line. Our kicking is where it breaks down. Our disposal efficiency might sit at 75%, but if you look at our kicking efficiency for the last 2.5 seasons, it is sitting below 55%.
Yep.
If you actually broke that down even further, when we're in pressure situations, it drops below 20%.
Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God! Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God!
Yep. Yeah, and it's generally sitting in the 50s anyway, because we've got a few guys right at the top of the tree whose disposal by foot is in the mid-70s to mid-80s, and then we've got a lot of guys who are down around the 50-45% mark. So it's certainly something that's been probably an issue with the Swans for a while. We do tend to butcher it by foot a little bit, but that's something that we were always able to make up for because, it was like turn the ball over, we'll just create a contest, cause a stoppage and win it back again, no problems. But unfortunately, it's not 2012 anymore. It's not 2014, and we can't get away with doing it anymore. So disposal efficiency, especially by foot, is a massive issue, a massive key point for this upcoming game.
That's right, and I think it all comes down to our game style. But anyway, let's move on to our predictions for the weekend ahead, and I've got a doozy for you.
Bring it.
Okay, this is what my doozy is going, and I know you've said Dane Rampy on Jeremy Cameron. Well, I'm going to say that Dane Rampy's going to play on Jeremy Cameron for the first half of the game.
Right.
But Jeremy Cameron will dominate the first half, and they will actually put young Tommy McCartan onto him in the third quarter. And I actually believe that Tommy McCartan will beat Jeremy Cameron for the rest of the match. I actually believe Tommy McCartan is going to be, and I'm deadly serious at this, I actually believe Tommy Boy is going to be a gun defender for us. I believe he's quick, he's aggressive, he reads the play well, and once he works out what he can and can't do with his body, he's going to be one of the best defenders that we have at our club. He is ruthless, and the way he throws himself in at the ball, for such a big guy, he's got great skills around his feet, and his intensity is strong. He is going to be a very, very good player if we give him the chance to develop down there as a backman.
I agree with all of that, except for the bit where you said he's going to beat Jeremy Cameron.
No, I believe that he can beat Jeremy Cameron.
I rate him, and you're right. He's going to make a centre half back for sure. But gee, Jeremy Cameron's a big ask.
And I agree. But what will happen is Jeremy Cameron will dominate the first half. He'll be so cocky, and then when they put Tommy McCartan on him, Jeremy Cameron will think he'll eat him alive, and he'll take it as too big for his own boots, and he'll lose all focus on the game because Jeremy Cameron can do that quite frequently.
Yep.
When he gets cocky and arrogant, he drops out of games.
Yep. My prediction is that Alir Ali is going to have 8 intercept marked, and he's going to have 3 goals kicked on him. And I think going up against the Giants, that's probably not a bad return, quite frankly. So 8 intercept marks, 3 goals kicked on him, and Alir will be our best defender.
Alir, the best defender. Well, I hope you're right, because I'm afraid to say people have been raving about Alir, but I reckon he's played one decent half of football this year, and that's it.
Weekend forecast, Steve. What's your sure thing?
My sure thing. It will be a low-scoring encounter as both teams will play with a defensive mindset.
The Swans are going to play with a defensive mindset. Really?
It's a sure thing, isn't it?
Oh, you must have... Well, that is true. I was going to say, you must have pulled out your patented Tasmanian crystal ball to come up with that one, bro.
I did. I certainly did. I went into it and I went, how is it going to be? It's going to be defensive because every Swans game is defensive. So that is a definite sure thing.
Fair enough. Well done.
What about yours?
My sure thing is that tomorrow the headlines will be full of stuff about how the Essendon fans, I almost said flogs, fans booed the heck out of Scott Pendlebury when he was accepting his best on ground for the Anzac Day match. It was really classless. The game was done. Scott Pendlebury was clearly the best on ground for that game. And, once the whistle was blown, that stuff should have been left alone. Immediately after the Scott Pendlebury thing, though, they got a gentleman up there to present the cup to Nathan Buckley for the winner of the match. And while this guy was talking about how the trophy represented the, sort of the names of players from the AFL and VFL who died on active service, they were still booing over the top of him. So my sure thing is that that's going to get all nutted out in the headlines over the next couple of days.
I think you're right, and I think that was absolutely disgusting. I watched the game on TV, and I was appalled. Scott Pendlebury did not deserve it. He's one of the cleanest players you can watch play. He was easily the best on ground, and what Nathan Buckley said at the end, to actually boo someone like Scott Pendlebury, you don't boo the champs. It's like Gary Ablett Jr. You do not boo the champs. It's like booing Buddy. You do not boo the champs. Just because they're good players, you should not boo them, especially when the game is over.
Yeah.
I hate that, and I hate people who boo people just because they've got more talent than they ever had in their lives.
Yeah, and I've got a bit of a soft spot for Nathan Buckley over this stuff as well, because Bucks was one of the few coaches who publicly spoke for Adam Goodes during that fiasco a couple of years ago, but we won't go into that.
No, not here, and it's not the right time.
No, most at stake, mate. Who's got something at stake this week for you?
Me, I believe it's Nick Blakey. I actually think he's being thrown into the furnace coming back in with this match. I don't think he had a great game in the NEAFL, for me personally, and I just am really concerned that they're just trying to push him too much, and I think it would have been better to leave him a couple of more games in the NEAFL, build up his confidence, get him to have a touch, but then they're bringing him back in against the Giants in probably one of our biggest, if not our biggest match of the year, because these matches always end up being big. Ever since GWS have become a reasonable team, we've struggled in them, and I'm just really concerned for Nick Blakey.
Yep. Bringing the new kids into a fairly dysfunctional team at the moment, or a team that's not travelling well, can't be good for their long-term development. So, yeah, it's real out of the frying pan into the fire for young Nick Blakey, and I hope he comes through it.
And my concern with it, Josh, is I think you can get away with it if you're in the midfield or a winger, because they're going to get more touches in a game.
Yeah.
But if you're just playing predominantly as a forward, you have to make your touches count. And I don't believe he has got enough experience and the way our ball is delivered for him to actually make all of his possessions count. And it puts more pressure on every other player in that forward line if everyone's not contributing. It's the same as Tommy McCartan last year. I believe he was thrown in to some serious situations that he wasn't ready to handle. And although he did it quite well, he's development probably was slowed because he had to play a key position when he wasn't ready.
Yep. Yeah, totally agree. Most at stake for me is clearly Sam Reid. I've been a little bit concerned about him for the last couple of weeks, and now it's being noticed by the football media. Obviously, the football media isn't the be-all and end-all of everything to do with Sydney Swans, but it is getting noticed. There is starting to be a little bit of pressure from the outside on the club for probably the first time in a long time. And if we don't turn some of this performance issues around, it's going to really start ramping up. So Sammy Reid's got quite a bit of stake at the moment, I think.
I agree with you, and I wouldn't just say it was Sam Reid. I would say there's quite a few players that are in the same boat, and I actually think it's the club itself that is in a bit of strife. Because if we end up losing 3 or 4 games over our next 4 or 5 games, we will actually be in a real predicament, and then questions will have to be asked. Because there's no way we should have dropped this far this quickly. I actually can see us finishing in the bottom 4, and I'm really hesitant to say it. We could probably finish bottom 2.
Yep. Yeah, if the status quo remains, it'd be pretty hard to escape that. But I never really thought we were a premiership threat. In fact, I actually thought that we would be hard-pressed to make finals this year, and that was just based on improvements to the list in other teams and the turnover of our own list. But I certainly, and no one else would have seen this kind of fall coming for it to be as dramatic as it is. I'm sure we'll pick up at some stage during the season, and hopefully it's going to be this week. But, it's by the time it happens, it's probably going to be too little too late anyway.
Well, my prediction at the beginning of the year was 12th to 16th, so I'm looking pretty good right about now.
Yeah, I said 8 to 12, yeah.
But anyway, moving on to doomsday scenario.
My doomsday scenario is, and this goes back to the ruck thing again, and I've been avoiding this for ages, but if Callum Sinclair gets injured, we are cooked. We're probably cooked already, but we will be cooked. And the reason why that becomes such a huge issue is that if it's an ACL or something like that, because we're rucking a guy who isn't really built for it, is really built for playing as a high-marking mobile forward, that an injury to him would be something that would affect us into next season as well. And I really love the Chief, and we can't afford for anything to happen to him. So my doomsday scenario is that Cal Sinclair gets injured.
Oh my God, well, I had the same doomsday scenario a few weeks ago, which really worried me, and the more I think about it, the more concerning it is, because the one position that we didn't pick up anyone for over the draft and over the trade period was a ruckman.
Yep.
Now, we've got Callum Sinclair on our list and Darcy Cameron, who are the only 2 recognised ruckmen. Naismith's sitting in the background, but we don't know when he's going to be ready, if he's going to be ready at all. They keep pushing it back further and further.
Yep.
So he's going to come in, say, after the bye, he's going to need 4 or 5 rounds in the NEFL to even get a touch. And then if something happens to either Darcy Cameron or Sinclair or both, which is a possibility, we're in serious strife. Now, if you look at most other clubs, with the exception of Adelaide, who are in this exact problem right now, Jacobs has gone down, they have 3 or 4 reasonable to good ruckmen. We have no one.
No, we don't. But you're right. So Naismith, they're talking about coming back, being available to play after the bye, but being available to play doesn't mean going straight back into seniors. So 3, 4, 5 weeks in the NEFL to try and get some kind of game fitness back, and you're looking at around 18, round 20 return, at which point you go, well, is it actually worth it? So
that's exactly right. Would he be better off having the rest of the season in the NEFL, getting his body right, ready for a tilt at the year after?
Yep. Your doomsday scenario?
Mine. This is one that I'm actually going to go with, and I think it's actually more than likely probably going to happen, which is what really scares me. The Giants will come out firing, and they'll win by close to 100 points after being knocked over by Fremantle last week. I actually think the Giants are going to come out, and I think they're going to pummel us.
That's a good score for a defensive game plan, Steve.
I know. I know.
Oh, well, on that sour note, we might leave it at that. Thanks for joining us tonight, me and Steve. It's been a pleasure, Steve. Thanks for coming along the ride with me.
Thank you, Josh. It's always a pleasure. You know how much we love doing this.
It's great fun, isn't it? You can find us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. Just look up the Swans blog, you'll find us there. The usual host, Justin Mitchell, will be back next week. Until then, up the Swannies.
Go Swans. Let's hope it's a win.